And thanks to APSIA, especially for the opportunity to communicate with all of you guys. We're thrilled to have this chance for a real conversation, and I do mean that literally. Feel free, pop on. Everybody knows how these platforms work nowadays. So with Zoom, you can raise your hand, you can throw things into the chat, but don't hesitate to make this really interactive as we go. So everyone knows, my name is Lisa Schroeter. I actually cover global trade policy for Dow Chemical, based out of here in Washington, D.C. But one of the jobs that really gets me excited getting up in the morning is volunteering as the chair of the WIT Trust. So Women in International Trade is a professional and personal networking association here in D.C. We're a chapter actually of a broader global association called the Organization of Women in International Trade, OWIT. WIT DC is by far the largest chapter, about 750 members. But what is fantastic about this group is it truly is a great community. And you'll see this in a second when I turn to two very dear friends, Julia and Maria, to be part of this conversation. When I say community, many of us have known each other throughout our careers, including back to when we were getting started and really looking to connect with other women to learn from that experience and think about how to not just get that job, but to build a long-term career success. My volunteer role with the organization these days is chairing our trust, which is the charitable arm that actually runs a scholarship program. So I am going to put a link into the chat for anyone who's got a little spare time still this week. WIT, our scholarship program, that unfortunately is only open to women. So for the gentlemen on the call, you can join the group and the association, just not the scholarship program. It is really focused on encouraging and supporting women at junior, senior, undergraduate level, but also in graduate school who are studying international trade or any of the affiliated fields. And you'll hear more about that as we get into talking. The scholarship itself is a one-time, one semester based on either a trade paper you've created or a recent one that you've done. So it's fairly user-friendly. There is a $1,500 scholarship that goes with it one time. I think more importantly, it's the chance to become part of WIT. We partner you up with a mentor. We make you a WIT member. And the really fun part we've been doing for the last 2 years is we build a program around the topic of your essay. So you get to be one of the boxes on these Zoom calls, helping us to present and lead a conversation around that topic. Great professional early credentials. So think about it. The deadline for the spring semester is April 1st. No joke. But I do hope that you'll be able to get those into us. And if you do have any questions about what you need for the program, info@wittrust.org. The information's all on our website. You can reach out to me directly. So with that aside, I am thrilled to be able to turn it over to two very dear friends and a third who will join us as soon as she gets off her other conflicting call. But two amazing women who have had really storied careers here in trade in DC. And I can't think of two better women to really embody what it takes to be successful across careers that I guarantee anyone looking to start off in trade now will be very similar. There'll be a lot of different aspects, areas, and directions, forks in the road as you move along that really help you build things that you can be truly passionate about. So we do have Julia Eppard, who is now currently with the law firm of Akin Gump, and Maria Zieba from the National Pork Producers Council, who have joined us to help share their stories, more importantly, their experiences and what skills you might want to think about developing as you look towards careers in trade. So Julia, why don't I kick off with you? What skills have you seen that have been really critical to your success?
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me. So I've had a kind of a winding career. I didn't start out in law. Of course, I went to law school, but it was a jumping off point for me. I was working at the U.S. Department of Commerce, and at least in our federal system, having an advanced degree is a really important step in order to open some doors and some career opportunities that you may not have with just an undergraduate. You can still get there for sure, but at least in my perspective, and also from my parents were very education focused. So that was a big motivation for me. was to go to a type of graduate school. And I looked at all my options and I settled on law, but it really did open doors for me in particular. And I think that was maybe my first lesson. Being a lawyer fresh out of law school wasn't my first career, but it opened my mind. And I think that's the most important thing is you may have a dream job set in your mind based on something you've studied or learned over time. But I never anticipated that I was going to be an international trade lawyer. I didn't even know that was a thing. But of course, now I've learned that trade is highly regulated. And of course, there's lots of lawyers involved in international trade. And I think taking steps and taking opportunities, I did internships whenever I could in the summertime or in undergrad or before law school. And I think so just keeping an open mind and trying new things, trying different opportunities, looking like I worked at the US Chamber of Commerce in DC. That was a very interesting kind of trade association angle that was new to me, and it was more academic in a sense than I had anticipated. I worked full time while I was in law school, so I didn't have the opportunity to do summer associate positions. But whenever you can, either during the course of your studies, pick up an internship, pick up a short-term position somewhere, even if it's unpaid, if you're able to do that. Because if anything, you're going to learn a little bit more about yourself, about your strengths, what you can work on, but it might open your eye to an opportunity or a direction that you weren't previously aware of. And I think just on the very functional skills basis, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be a good writer. I can't think of a career path where being a good writer isn't important, whether it's a very effective email or public relations piece, but in my case, a legal brief. But on a day-to-day basis, that is the core of what I do is persuasive writing, and be open to learning from other people, accept criticism and edits and guidance from people around you, and learn from it. And that will make you a better, more persuasive professional in whatever area of profession you decide to go. But in general, I think I'm very glad to see so many people interested in trade. I think it's one of the most fascinating areas professionally. It involves so many interdisciplinary issues. You have a little bit of policy in there. You have a little international relations. You have economics. You have interactions with business. And I think you will find that there are tremendous opportunities and will be very fulfilling. But happy to answer any specific questions about what it's like to practice law in international trade. But thank you. That's good.
Thanks, Julia. That's perfect. And I love the way you talked about that. Persuasive communications. That's a perfect term. Maria, how about your experience?
Yeah, so I started off my career is a little bit different, I would say. Even though I'm in the pork business, I work for the National Pork Producers Council, and they represent, I help represent the 65,000 hog farmers in the United States. I don't come from an agricultural background. I come from California, but I come from LA, and I'm a first generation college student. And I did not even know that this is a type of career that you could have. I knew that I was interested in international, which is why I studied that in my undergrad, but I had no idea that you could go and represent a group of people internationally and domestically to Congress and embassies and all that stuff. And the path that I took was a little similar to Julia, and I think that she hit on some really, really key points, which is, you have to have an open mind to different perspectives and ideas, but to different opportunities. When I was in my undergrad, I took pretty much any internship that I could get. I interned for a member of Congress in the district office, which exposed me to the Farm Bill. and I had no idea what the Farm Bill was at the time. And perhaps many of you don't know what it is, but it's a really very important piece of legislation, which then that internship led me to an internship at an environmental agency in California. Didn't really have any experience in environment, in that space, but they needed somebody in public affairs. So I ended up taking that internship, but the combination of those led me to an opportunity at USDA, where they were looking for an intern that knew basics of agriculture. So I knew what a farm bill was. And then I had been an intern at a public affairs office. So I ended up, my first internship in Washington, DC was at USDA's Farm Service Agency in their public affairs shop. And I remember when I got the job, and after talking to the person that had hired me, she said, I hired you because you were the only one that had knew what a farm bill was and had any experience. So in agriculture, and that doesn't mean that I didn't grow up on a farm. I had to learn a lot about ag, but I think, you really should try to keep an open mind to different career paths and not think, oh, well, USTR or USDA or the Foreign Agricultural Service or State Department, those are the only paths. There's so many different areas. And if I would have said, well, I had this preconceived notion of what agriculture was, and if I would have gone with that preconceived notion, I wouldn't be where I am now. But I also would completely agree with Julia in some of the things that are so important are that persuasive writing and presentation skills, and just being able to talk to people about what you do, but also, that doesn't involve getting in front of an audience and talking to people. It also means just one-on-one, asking people what they do and what interested in them in that career. And even now, just I have friends outside of the ag space because I need to know what's going on outside of ag. It's really important because everything ends up being tied together. So don't be afraid of asking a lot of questions. I think that all the times that I've asked people questions, it's usually I get a pretty good response. People don't usually turn you away. I know it can be kind of scary to do cold calls, but sometimes that's what you have to do to learn something new and have an open mind to a new idea. So I think those would be the top three things. It's keep an open mind to new opportunities, even though they might make you uncomfortable. To read a lot, because if you read a lot, you're going to become a really good writer. And it's that basic, and talking to people and asking questions and networking, and those have been the three things that I've really used in my career and helped me get to where I am.
Lisa, can I throw one more thing in before you jump?
Please. Please.
So it occurred to me though, on the networking thing, like Maria said, join a professional organization. WIT is a perfect example of where you can learn so much outside of your particular area of interest. And it expands your knowledge of what's going on, and maybe you'll find a path that you weren't aware of before. And WIT, we have student members, professional members from literally every corner, and I learn something every time I participate in a program. So whether it's that in particular, but there's professional organizations around every profession type. So
yeah.
Great point. And I think one of the key themes that both of you talked to too, I love that the comments about open mind and really trying new things. Yeah, that's one of my mom's favorite sayings is, well, if you didn't ask, it was already no. So ask. Sometimes someone will tell you no, but a lot of times you'll get the yes. And I think that's really important too, as you think about, as you look at different roles. And Maria, you said it, by not limiting yourself, you don't look at things and reject because you don't fit the bill exactly. I will be very candid. If you look at the job description for this position, my original position in Dow, I didn't have half the qualifications they were asking for. But a lot like Maria, you were just describing, I did have things, I had trade background, which they knew they didn't have. So that became a really critical part of it. And that's part of the reason why I got the job and have stayed with it. But I think there's a lot of, we're getting some really, really good questions into, and Julia, this might speak to a bit of your ideas around joining organizations too, particularly for students, for those that aren't in DC looking at trade, how important is the direct knowledge of, in this case, the question comes across as Capitol Hill. Remind everybody, especially in the trade world, not your only key point here in DC. The administration matters, the embassies matter. It's a whole world to itself. But Julia, Maria, I'd be interested, Maria, as you said, even coming from California, how important was it being part of DC, in DC, getting to know DC? Maybe Maria, you want to start?
Well, I can kick it off. I thought that I would be in DC for a few years and then move back to California. I've been in DC for almost 15 years now. I met my husband at USDA and we got married, and we're now lifers, I think, in DC. But it's not the only thing. It's DC is great, but there's so many other jobs in the international space that are not based in DC. So I work a lot with exporters, and where you look where they're headquartered, some are headquartered in Arkansas, some are headquartered in Denver or outside of Denver. There's some in California. I happen to be sitting in Geneva right now. There's a lot of international trade work that is done here, around the world at different capitals. And I think, if you're looking at a job that you're thinking I can only do an international job in DC, my predecessor thought the same thing, and he now works for the city of San Antonio, and he's doing marketing and trying to bring businesses, international businesses to the state, to the city. So there's a lot more that can be done outside of DC. DC is great if that's your space, but you can certainly go outside of that and find some really interesting careers out there.
Great, Julia.
Sure. I'm kind of a native of the area. I've been here since my dad was military, and this was his last posting. So I've been here since I was in like 5th grade. So I don't have a perspective of a new person to DC. I think it has just such tremendous opportunities, particularly in international trade and international affairs, and especially as a lawyer practicing, because my entire practice is federal based, and all the agencies, as Lisa said, the agencies are very important to trade. They're all in DC, but I have a number of colleagues that they didn't start here. They might have ended up here, but some of my colleagues are in Houston or Singapore, or we have a Geneva office, we have a London office. So there's so many centers of trade, and as Maria said, the clients themselves, they're literally everywhere, all over the United States, all over the world. So do keep an open mind. And I think that would actually be a very interesting perspective, one that I don't have myself, is to work in another country, in another culture, and really dive into their industry, the way they practice. So I think that could be super interesting, but you don't have to be a DC insider at all. There's just tremendous opportunity.
And I want to reinforce what Julia was saying before too, when you think about sort of building those relationships and creating that network. I can remember I contacted my first boss in town. I started with a tech company, and now I work in the chemical industry, which I'm still not quite sure how that happened, but I'm glad it did. It's worked out. But when I called my first boss, that tech guy, to get advice on interviewing with Dow, I got really nervous because of my lack of knowledge about the chemical industry. Clearly not a scientist. He thought that was the funniest thing he ever heard of, because the chemical industry, my company, we have a lot of scientists. What they needed was a government affairs person. And that doesn't mean you have to know everybody on Capitol Hill. If you know the network, if you know someone that you can get in touch with that says, hey, Julia, I was hoping to be able to reach someone on export controls. Do you have someone? The being able to work the system and understand it, you don't have to be on the ground for that. But you do really have to build up a good network of trusted friends, partners, and people that can help you get to the right place or the right set of answers or the right set of intel that you need. And I can think of no one who is better at that actually than our third friend who's joined us, Barbara Weisel. Barbara, as you can tell, Julia and Maria have just been talking a lot through various skills that have gotten them to their careers. And I think one of the questions I was just about to ask too was thinking of skills that help make transitions happen. And as you've gone from a great career at the U.S. government, USTR, now over on the consulting private sector side, what skills would you suggest to our students they should be thinking about building their careers?
Well, nice to be here with all of you. I would say, first of all, when you're transitioning to another career, I think I've been in Washington for a long time, so I think of it as a Washington thing that a lot of people do, although I'm sure it's done all over the place, all over the world. But, I would say first humility, and it's not a skill, it's just a personality trait, or that when you go from one position to another, you have a certain amount of expertise in the position that you've left, but you're going to move to another one where you're using those skills and building on them to focus on something else. And I think in that regard, I think remembering that they hired you for the skills that you had, but that you have to transfer them to something new is just a really important thing when you go into a new job. And I think this is for any job that you're starting, you have doubts about why somebody hired you or whether you're going to fit in and you're going to be able to carry your weight, but they hired you for a particular reason. So focus on those skills that you brought to the job, and then find a project that you can work on that allows you to take advantage of those skills and build upon them, and be open and inquisitive and ask questions as much as possible. And I don't think that this really just applies to a career transition. It applies to starting a new job at any stage in your career.
Very fair points. And speaking of that stages, we've had two really great questions come in, kind of in the same vein. If you think about getting started, and I know we've all mentioned you're taking internships or short-term work to start to get into the field. We've had a student, both international students, who have mentioned either the challenge of wanting to work in development, but clearly as an international student, it's kind of hard to get into, especially internships with federal agencies, or another international student who's really focusing on the security space. You're interested in sort of what courses or technical skills should be developing in order to get an internship in international trade. I guess my answer to the last one first would be, I would worry less about the additional courses. I would go ahead and start with the internships. Really, they will, once you are on board, whatever organization you're working with is going to spend a lot of time talking about how you need to be looking at issues. But the important thing is to be able to get in and get started with learning kind of how things work. But maybe to both of those, if you think about getting started, especially trying to break into either the economic development, international security, international trade fields, thoughts, advice? Maybe Barbara, I'll start with you.
I mean, I guess I would say that for those who are not U.S. citizens, that are not going to be looking at U.S. government jobs, there are a lot of companies and international organizations that will particularly value the fact that you're not a U.S. citizen, because they would like to build a diverse workforce. They would like people who speak multiple languages. That may not be something that the U.S. applicants bring to the table, or maybe it is, but you're certainly able to offer that as a skill. So I think being a little more broadening your search to other kinds of organizations that and companies that would be looking for those kinds of international skills is really important. And I would say, when you think about how many, you can just open the Fortune 500 or any other list of companies that are international, and many of them have internship programs or have opportunities for young people to get their foot in the door. And so coming to a job like that with an international perspective might be something that they would really welcome.
Great points. Julia?
Sure. I would say first, and this is probably a very obvious point, but take advantage of your career development office. If you're still in school, whether it's, if it's a graduate program, they are deeply invested in you landing somewhere that is meaningful. So they're just a tremendous resource. I actually even went back to mine in law school when I was looking to transition careers, and they were extremely helpful even many years later. So take full advantage of that. And I would definitely echo what Barbara said is open your mind. So there's so many nonprofit and trade association opportunities, either regionally based, if they're a business council, there might be industry or area based, like agriculture, that kind of thing. They offer just a tremendous responsibility, because you do just jump right in, and they have such a need for bright people. And then finally, I don't have any particular coursework I would recommend. I do think some basic knowledge of economics is good in whatever part of trade you're going to work in, just understanding how kind of the economies work, but just work hard, get good grades.
Lisa,
Great advice.
can I just come back on that one? And to build on what Julia said, that there's also like state, if you're in the United States, state boards that do this. It's not just federal government. A lot of the states do this, and I think the same all over the world. So, there are a lot of opportunities that are sub-federal.
Great points. Maria?
Yeah, I think you guys, both of you hit on a lot of the ideas that I had in mind. The NGO space is very open and welcoming. But beyond that, I think I can't stress enough. If you're looking for a job in international, don't limit yourself to what you think you can do. Just apply for a job that it might be, well, I don't have any tech experience. Well, you don't have to. That's why you're an intern. We're going to teach you. I don't have a lot of ag experience. Well, we'll teach you. We just need you to have the basics. And really the basic for me, when we had an internship program and we were looking for candidates, is this person willing to learn and work hard? And I know that sounds really silly, but I can't stress how many times I had an intern who was working really hard, and then another one that wasn't, and it was so noticeable. And as a hiring manager, you tend to want to put the resources towards the kid that really shows the effort and the emphasis. And sometimes the kid already has the background, sometimes it doesn't. But if you're willing to work hard and apply yourself and learn something new, it's a really good market out there, especially for people that are trying to start off here. I think that there's a lot of opportunities if you're just patient, but also willing to go out there and like Julia mentioned earlier, network, be part of some of these associations, because a lot of these things get posted online. We have job postings with WIT. There's opportunities. Lisa and I are on the board of WITA, which is the Washington International Trade Association, and they also do internships. So there's a ton of different opportunities out there.
Absolutely. And I'm going to build, I'll add two things to that too. And one is to think about trade associations. I know what I've always liked about those as a way of starting to get involved, particularly in any community, is it's a great way of test driving. And I think that speaks to, as you've been hearing the comment about having an open mind, the reality is none of us are still in our first job. whatever job that you start with will not be the job you retire from. And that's an opportunity, really, especially as you start out. That is the time to trial different jobs, new experiences. Some will work. I worked at a law firm for 6 months, and that helped me decide that I did not want to go to law school. I thought that was the direction. It changed my mind completely. You get to try things, and trade associations, I feel in particular, when you're getting to know a new community, and that's not just DC, that could be Chicago, New York, the Port of Los Angeles. A trade association is a great way of getting to know the community. You're in a role that exposes you to the variety of members that are out there. Maybe you'll fall in love with ag or tech, or decide to take on development in Africa instead. But it gives you a sense of who's out there, what are they doing, and what are some of the opportunities? What are the opportunities that are a fit for your goals as well? Remember too that a big part of this is getting a sense of not just the job or the car that you're going after, but what is the environment that you're going to really be successful at? Do you need more structure, less structure, etc.? But think about it from that perspective as well. I'm curious, everybody's mentioned kind of career transitions too. We're talking a lot about starting out, but that does go hand in hand with moving on. So I'm curious, as you think about whether it's going from government to private sector, or ag and moving to DC, what have been some of the critical skills you've seen that have been necessary to making those big transitions? Julia, maybe I'll start with you on that.
Sure. I have had some very significant career transitions in my life. So I started out in the federal government, as I said, out of undergrad. I studied international business and economics and French in undergrad. And at the time, I wasn't really sure what that meant, but the Commerce Department was such a tremendous learning opportunity for me. And that was the first time that I really kept an open mind and took a job in a path that I didn't really expect. I thought I was going to be in private industry. And then I went to law school at night. Again, I never thought I was going to be a lawyer, but it suited me. And so in that instance, I really relied on my law school, and being in DC, I was able to get a very good job in a big law firm after law school. So that was very fortunate. But then I had children. So I left practice for 10 years and I was home with my children for 10 years. And so what allowed me, I took a little hourly legal job with a friend of a friend just to get started. But what got me my dream job back in international trade was maintaining my connections that I started with. So the people I practiced with right out of law school, it was an excellent practice, a very big practice. And I kept just enough contact with them, and I kept my bar current, always paid my dues, did all of that. And that's what got me my job. One person talked to another person and an opportunity opened, and then I got my dream job. So keep connected as best you can. And as I think Maria said, stay current. Be reading, even if you're taking some kind of hiatus from working, or you're in a career that's not exactly where you want to be reading online. There's so many different opportunities to stay informed. But I think the key point for me was maintain those contacts with the really supportive people that literally to this day I'm still working with, because they were really my champions.
And champions are so key. Maria?
I know it might not seem like it, but I am a little bit risk adverse. So when I started my my career, I actually thought I would work for the federal government forever, because it was secure. It was a secure job, and it was really scary to jump from the federal government, a good paying USDA job, to I went to work for the milk producers, National Milk, and the U.S. Dairy Export Council, and worked on their trade policy issues. So this is another trade association. And I think that jump was really scary for me, because I thought, well, can I do it? Is this something that I'm going to be able to can I keep up? And I did. And then this other opportunity opened up with the pork producers. And I remember, sitting, and I was just having lunch with my friend last week, and we were reminiscing on the fact that I wanted to apply for this job at MPPC. And we were both sitting in my car, and I said, I don't know if I can do it. It seems like it's too hard. And she said, of course you can do it. It's fine. You'll figure it out. And so, surround yourself with really good friends that are going to push you as well, and are going to tell the little person, on one side of, your shoulder that says you can't do it. You need to surround yourself with a lot of those other friends that know the value and know what you're able to do, because I think we are our biggest critics, and we are the if anything is going to stop you, it's going to be yourself. It's going to be could I do this? Should I do this? So take chances. I know that I wouldn't be here without having surrounded myself with people that are champions of me and help, have helped steer me on a great path. But beyond that, it's been really good to have those experiences and learn beyond them. And I never thought I would be with the pork industry for as many years as I have been. But now I've recently, about 6 months ago, I was promoted to head their international affairs division and shop. And so I think that, 8 years ago, I probably would have said, no way could I do that. But it's something that if you apply yourself, and you just need to work hard and surround yourself with people that can really help reinforce what they know about you, but also what you know about yourself. Because sometimes we doubt ourselves for some reason. And so I think that if that was one thing that I could tell the younger version of me, is don't worry, everything will be okay, and you can do it. And so I think that would be something that I would share with the group as much as possible.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like that's something I still need to hear on a regular basis too. Barbara, other thoughts? You're on mute.
And I'm on mute, is what I would say. I guess what I would say is that people at every stage of their career, when they're looking at positions, sometimes tend to be reticent to reach out. And I am talking, across generations here. When I started looking for a job, you were literally pounding the pavement because there was no internet. So, it was hard. You had to cold call people on the phone. But you all can email people and ask to meet. And a lot of times, and I heard this from somebody who's looking to change careers way well into their career now, that they're uncomfortable asking for help, as though they should be able to do some of this on their own, or they should be able to find the jobs through whatever online or alumni sources there are. And it's awkward to call people that you don't know, or even people that you do know, and you feel like, well, you're not friends with them to ask them for help with jobs. But all of us on the phone that are here from WIT, I think have experienced a situation where people will either cold call you or cold email you, or they have somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that knows you, that says they have somebody who's really interested in a job in international. Would you be willing to have coffee with them and talk about it, and just give them ideas of things that they might pursue, or just ways to think about this. And you should absolutely do that, because one thing that I learned when I was changing careers and was myself uncomfortable about asking for help was that people are unbelievably generous, and everybody is willing to reach out and help, even if not that day or that week. They may be busy, but people are unbelievably generous with their time to help somebody who's looking to get their foot in the door. And maybe it's because they remember how hard it was to get started, or maybe it's just because they want to pay it forward. But But you should absolutely do that. And when you do that, it's really important to be very clear about what kinds of things interest you. You know, can you demonstrate that on your resume fully? Hopefully a little bit, at least demonstrate an interest in international or in trade, if that's what you're interested in. You know, some speck of evidence that that's an area of interest, and that, you know, I've had people come to me and they'll say, can you have coffee? I'm interested in international. And I say, well, international's a pretty big area. Let's talk about narrowing that down. Are you interested in international ag? Are you interested in international trade? Are you interested in international finance? Like what area? So it's also good to think about, though it doesn't have to be one area, you may be interested in a number of areas, but you may be interested in environment internationally. You may be, you know, whatever it is, but don't come in and just say, I'm interested in international, as though all you wanted to do was travel for your life. Like that you've actually thought about it a little bit more deeply and at least have a couple of areas that most interest you, even if you're open to other areas. But like I said, don't hesitate to be in touch with people, even if you don't really know them, because people really will come through for you.
Barbara, that's such a great point. Let's dive into the mechanics of that a little bit. I mean, everything that you just mentioned goes to a big part of how to do that outreach, how anyone should be thinking about building up champions in their own space and for their career. So as you've just mentioned, it's really important to be specific, to demonstrate that there's a tangible link to the speaker, why you want to have coffee with that person in particular. But what else should our audience be thinking about? I mean, in terms of how you like to be approached, you know, what works or what makes kind of an outreach, especially a cold call like that, more acceptable? What are things that students should think about from the mechanics of reaching out like that? Maria, maybe I'll start with you.
I think Barbara hit on some of those points. Be a little bit more focused on, you know, you don't have to already have the background. And it's like, you know, I'm in ag, I'm in international ag. You don't have to come and say, well, I have all these internships in, you know, for all these international trade companies or ag companies, but coming and approaching with, I have an interest in learning more about what it is that you find, you know, fascinating about this specific ag issue, or I read in the news that there is a dispute on agriculture for X commodity. Can you, you know, would you have time to tell me about your career and explain this to me? I think that would, that shows a level of interest, more of, hey, I'm going to cold call you and I just want to have coffee. It shows that you are interested in the topic and learning a little bit more about it, even though you may not have the knowledge. That's what I used. That's still what I do to this day, where I call people that I call a friend of a friend and say, hey, I need to know a little bit more about what's going on this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Doesn't have much to do with ag right now, but I still want to know what's going on. And so this is why I'm interested in doing it. And so then people are more willing to pick up the phone or meet with you and have that time with you. So it's, I know it takes time, but personalizing things a little bit more on the specifics, and asking a question that is going to be provocative for the person that you're asking that of, just because then there's something to dialogue, and I, for one, then feel a little bit more comfortable, as opposed to, I'm like, well, how awkward is this going to be? What am I going to talk to this person about? So it's a little bit, you know, that's kind of how I've approached it, and it seems to have worked. And I enjoy it when people come to me with specific topics as well.
Absolutely. Avoiding awkward is always a good theme in life. Julia?
I'm already an awkward person, so
No.
I think I'm awkward.
Me too.
Absolutely not.
Me too. I would just add, if you could, if if it's a subject area, that's great. But also if you let the person know how they found, how you found them, right? It was that I heard you speak on this panel, or I saw an article that you wrote, or whatever it is. How did you find that? And then they'll make a better connection. And so I think it's just that, again, it personalizes the outreach.
I'm just going to add one more piece too, and this is the very, basic mechanic element of it is be polite, be consistent, and follow up. I can guarantee if you reached out to any of us, and I'm sure we would be very, very welcome to do that, but life is busy at the moment. If we come back and say, okay, but I can't talk for 2 weeks, that is no reflection. Don't let that little demon on your shoulder start making it. It's because you're getting brushed off. Things are busy. So being respectful of that matters. It is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of crazy calendars. Be flexible if things need to get rescheduled. Again, it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on just life is crazy these days. And I may be a very old-fashioned girl when it comes to this, but send the thank you. Follow up, let people know. If we've had a great conversation, you go away and I never hear from you again. I wonder, I hope it helped. I hope you ended up somewhere. Let people know. That speaks to your building the network. If I was part of helping you to get something you're really successful at, then that becomes a relationship longer term, plays in. So make sure you think about that follow-up.
Could I add one more thing?
Please.
There's a lot of resources out there, but I think that LinkedIn is a resource that, yeah, you can do the networking, you can email people and connect with them, but I learn a lot from following people that they put articles up, whether they're, I learn a lot from different law firms as they post new articles, or follow different companies, and I hear, I read what they're up to and what they're doing. It's a free way of seeing what else is out there, not only in the one area that you may be interested in, but in other areas, and everything is condensed into one format and one space. You don't have to, I have to read the New York Times and I have to read The Economist and I have to read, it's everything is in one spot, and I find it to be quite useful, and I learn about things through there that I wasn't aware of, and it's really great resources.
I 100% agree with that. Absolutely.
Definitely. And not to keep plugging WIT, but it is one of those groups. We've had programs like that before, and I will admit, I sat through the program on how to better use LinkedIn because I knew there were things you could do with it. I just wasn't sure what they are. So it speaks to some of the skills you can pick up and how you can make a lot of these tools that are out there, work better for you. So I know we've just got a couple minutes left. I promise I'm not cutting off questions. So if you've got, if you're anything like me and you've waited to be the last question to be more memorable, now is the time to post that in. But in the meantime, for all of our speakers, I'd be very curious as we've had this great conversation, what one piece of advice, when you look back now, your 20-year-old self, what is the one piece of advice you would give that young lady as she was thinking about getting started? Barbara, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to another point from the previous conversation, and that is if you are meeting with people, to not be afraid to say to them, thank you very much. This has been very enlightening, lots of good advice. Do you have ideas of other people I can talk to? Like, tap into their network, because people also are happy to do that, especially if you can give an indication of the direction that you hope to go in, even if it's relatively broad, but like some guidance of who do you want to be connected to? What kind of background are the people you want to be connected to? Do they need to have, to help direct you? So don't be afraid to do that. And those people probably will be responsive as well. In terms of my 20-year-old, I mean, like I said, it's such a different world now than my 20-year-old. self that it doesn't really apply to this group because there's so many more opportunities now, and there's so many more things like paid internships than there were at the time that I was starting out. If I were starting out now, I would absolutely just do what I think you probably said before I got on, which is jump in and do as much as you can. I think that when you come in and you have all of those self-doubts and you're looking all around you, to not worry about any of that. Focus on your work, focus on what you can contribute, and keep upbeat and don't get involved in office politics and things like that. Just keep your eye on the ball and what you can learn and what you can contribute, and a very positive attitude about everything that you're working on. And don't worry about the rest. It will come if you're working hard and staying positive.
Great advice. Julia?
Sure, I absolutely agree with the positivity point, and I would say have confidence. Look, I love what I do, and just stick with it and have confidence and persevere.
All right, Maria.
One thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to be the hardest working person in the room. And if you're in the DC space, it is likely that, that you're going to be surrounded by people that are uber smart and have tons and tons and tons of experience. Just try to soak in as much from them as possible and ask those questions and reach out to them. Don't be intimidated by it, because people like to share their experiences. And I agree with Barbara. Don't get involved in the office gossipy and politics. Just be a person that's going to stay positive and is going to be known as a hard worker, because that goes a long way in DC, especially nowadays.
Can I just add, I already had my turn, but I want to add one thing, is that a lot of jobs now are very team focused. And I think they were somewhat less so before we all were so connected and before we could talk on Zoom and all of this. Things are very, very team focused. And everybody brings something else to a team. I have a friend that works on the multiple intelligences education philosophy. Everybody has an intelligence and everybody brings something to the table. And when you're working in a team, as long as you are confident about what you are bringing to the table and you're positive and creative and you work well with other people, you don't have to have all of the intelligences. You just have to bring that specific thing to the table. And I think that when you're a young person now, what you're bringing to the table automatically is an understanding of the world that's different than the more senior people who didn't grow up understanding technology the way you do and understanding the culture that you grew up in. And that is a really valuable thing for a lot of companies to have. So with nothing else, you're already bringing something to the table. And then when you add on to that, the specific interests and experiences you have, you're probably coming with a lot to contribute. And you should recognize that. Don't be cocky about it, but recognize that. Recognize you have a lot to learn, but you also come to the table with something to offer.
Exactly. And these are skills you're already developing. I mean, the good news is this is what university and the programs you're in now are meant to teach you. I mean, when you're working on group projects, it's about building consensus. It's not about shouting each other down. And when you think about that, that's not different than an office team meeting is going to be too. You need to persuade, you need to engage, you need to learn from your colleagues so that at the end of it, when everyone walks out of a room, you've all got the great paper or the great project or the great next step when it comes to office. I think one last very quick question that we had from an attendee asked about that transition element again. And knowing as you're in grad programs, there may be many of you who have had kind of big careers already in a certain space and are looking at this to transition. The expertise you've developed in your first career can be very helpful to your second. If you worked in something like immigration law, movement of people is a big deal in trade policy. That's been a long-standing fight at the World Trade Organization, whether it's transition of skills or people. Think about what you've learned, what you already know how to do well, the environment you've learned to operate in, working across bureaucracies. Think about what are those elemental areas that would transition now to looking at these issues from that different lens. A little bit like going from the tech space to going to chemistry. It's a very different set of trade issues between those two, but at the end of the day, it's still the same trade environment. I feel like that's one of the ways that you can make that good, successful midterm or experience transition as well. And Carmen, I know we've just about run out to our time, so I want to thank everybody who participated today, especially our amazing, great speakers, Julia, Maria, and Barbara. As always, fantastic insights. We hope it's been helpful. And we hope to stay engaged and involved, whether you're looking at WIT and some of the programs that we do, or as we continue to stay engaged with the amazing organization that is APSIA. Carmen, thanks for having us.
Thank you all for this excellent insight. And I loved the really practical things students can do now, and then that longer term perspective that they're going to benefit from. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our attendees. I hope we'll see you at the next APSIA career webinar on March 30th. I put the link in the chat, and I look forward to being engaged with WIT as I can as a non-trade professional. So thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.